Dr. Watson, physically drained from the day's exertions, attempted to rest on the sofa after Sherlock Holmes departed for a concert. However, sleep eluded him as his mind churned with the disturbing events they had encountered. Chief among his thoughts was the grotesque, almost baboon-like visage of Enoch Jail. Drebber, the murdered man. The sinister nature of Drebber's face left Watson wrestling with an uncomfortable sense of gratitude toward whoever had ended the man's life. Yet, he reminded himself that the law viewed all lives equally, and justice must be served regardless of the victim's character. As Watson reflected, he found himself drawn to Holmes' theory of poisoning. He recalled Holmes sniffing Drebber's lips, clearly detecting something that had sparked the idea. Yet, doubts lingered. If not poison, what could have caused Drebber's death? There were no visible wounds, no signs of strangulation, and yet there was the inexplicable presence of thick blood on the floor. The lack of any weapon or struggle only deepened the mystery. Watson felt certain that Holmes had already pieced together an explanation, but the specifics of his theory remained a mystery to Watson himself. When Holmes returned, it was far later than the concert alone could explain. His demeanor was bright and animated as he praised the performance, musing on Darwin's theory of music. Holmes suggested that music's origins predated speech, resonating with ancient primal instincts buried within the human soul. Watson remarked on the breadth of the idea, prompting Holmes to assert that broad ideas were essential to understanding nature. Observing Watson's unease, Holmes attributed it to the troubling nature of the Brixton Road case. Watson admitted as much, confessing that despite his harrowing wartime experiences, this case had unsettled him in a different way. Holmes acknowledged the unique power of imagination to amplify horror, noting that without imagination, there could be no fear. Shifting to the case, he asked if Watson had seen the evening paper. Upon hearing that he had not, Holmes revealed that while the report was generally accurate, it had omitted a crucial detail. When Drebber's body was moved, a woman's wedding ring had fallen to the floor. Holmes considered the omission fortunate and shared that he had taken decisive action by placing an advertisement in the found section of the morning paper. The ad announced the discovery of a plain gold wedding ring on Brixton Road and directed interested parties to Dr. Watson at 221B Baker Street between 8 and 9 that evening. Apologizing for using Watson's name, Holmes explained that his own name would have drawn unwanted attention. Watson questioned what would happen if someone responded to the ad, given that they did not possess the actual ring. Holmes, unfazed, produced a nearly identical one, assuring Watson it would suffice. He confidently predicted that the man in the brown coat, or an accomplice, would answer the addy. Holmes reasoned that the man had dropped the ring while leaning over Drebber's body, and only realized its absence after leaving the scene. Returning to retrieve it, he would have found the police already present and been forced to feign drunkenness to avoid suspicion. Holmes deduced that the man would eagerly search the evening papers for the ring and, seeing the advertisement, would have no reason to suspect a trap. Assuring Watson of the visitor's imminent arrival, Holmes instructed him to prepare for the encounter. To this end, Holmes advised Watson to clean and load his service revolver, cautioning that their visitor might be desperate. Watson complied and returned to find Holmes calmly scraping his violin. Holmes remarked that he had received a telegram from America confirming his theory, though he refrained from elaborating. As the clock struck 8, Holmes began making preparations, leaving the door slightly ajar and positioning the key inside. It wasn't long before the doorbell rang. Expecting a dangerous adversary, Watson was caught off guard when their visitor turned out to be a frail, elderly woman. She entered hesitantly, blinking in the light and nervously fumbling with a newspaper. Pointing to the advertisement, she claimed that the ring belonged to her daughter, Sally, whose husband, a ship steward, would be furious if he discovered its loss. Watson handed her the ring, which she identified as Sally's, and asked for her address. She provided conflicting responses, first mentioning Houndsditch, then Peckham, which aroused Holmes' suspicion. Nevertheless, Watson allowed her to leave, and she departed, expressing her gratitude profusely. The moment the door closed, Holmes sprang into action, declaring the woman an accomplice, and rushing out to follow her. Watson watched from the window as Holmes pursued her down the street. Left alone, Watson found himself restless, unable to sleep as he waited anxiously for Holmes' return. Hours passed before Holmes reappeared, his expression a mix of amusement and frustration. He recounted how he had trailed the woman who had cleverly evaded him. She had hailed a cab, loudly given an address in Houndsditch, and entered it, seemingly in earnest. Holmes, perched on the back of the cab, followed closely, only for the driver to discover upon arrival that his passenger had vanished. Holmes realized then that the old woman had been a young, agile man in disguise, a masterful actor who had successfully outwitted him. Despite the setback, Holmes found humor in the situation, remarking on the skill of his adversary while vowing to prevail in the end. Exhausted, Watson retired to bed, leaving Holmes to brood over the case. Late into the night, the mournful strains of Holmes' violin filled the air as he pondered the mysteries that still eluded him.